Right from tyres to the somewhat unlikely subject of food. Government figures suggest that the average family in this country these days spends only £30 to £40 a week on food. That seems an appallingly low figure, but it looks even worse when you compare it to the amount of money we're prepared to spend on our cars. Because the AA tells us that the average car these days costs £50 to £60 a week to run. Those are, of course, average figures, so you can't draw too many conclusions, but it does show the kind of sacrifice that people are prepared to make in order to have the mobility that comes from having a set of wheels. Of course, one way of reducing that expenditure is to buy at the very bottom of the market. So away with BMWs and all that sort of glamour, and we're going to look at the 4 cheapest family cars you can buy. As it happens, they all come from Eastern Bloc countries, and they sell themselves basically on the marketing pitch. You can buy a new car for roughly the cost of a second-hand one. But does that claim really bear closer scrutiny? The cars we've chosen are the Skoda 105S at £2,598, the FSO 1300 at £2,990, the Yugo 45A at £3,250, and the Łada Riva 1300 SL, the luxury model, at £3,725. Virtually the only Western alternatives to approach these prices are the Citroën 2CV at £3,095 and the 750cc Fiat Panda at £3,490, both of which are really too small to be considered as family cars. Well, this is the Skoda from Czechoslovakia. It's very similar to a late 1950s rear-engine Renault design, so we're really talking about 30-year-old technology. Its main plus points, apart from that spectacularly low price, are that it's quite roomy. It's by far the best finished of these Eastern Bloc cars, both in terms of the paint job and in terms of the interior trim. In fact, it's a pretty high standard. In terms of drivability, well, the acceleration is frankly very poor indeed. The handling is uncertain and skittish on bumpy roads. The gearbox has more than the occasional impenetrable moment, and these seats, well, they're just minimal. So I would say very good value for a runabout, but could be a bit of a handful on rather longer journeys. However, we mustn't forget this car regularly goes through all the rigours of the Lombard RAC Rally and occasionally wins its class. So it certainly has a fair amount of staying power. The Łada from Russia and the FSO from Poland both date from the late 60s, so we're talking about 20-year-old technology, and unquestionably they look it. And they're both modelled on discarded Fiat designs, the 124 and the 125. The Łada costs £700 more. For that you get a tachometer and a radio stereo and headlamp washers. But their major offering, of course, is space, because they are genuine 4 or 5 seaters. Unfortunately, from then on, it's all downhill, because they really are badly put together. On the outside, you've got ill-fitting panels and a marginal paint job. On the inside, you've got badly cut trim everywhere, bundles of wires hanging out, and so on. And it gets worse because the drivability reflects this generally second-rate appearance. The FSO is basically very similar, very dated in appearance, both inside and out. The dashboard in particular has a sort of late 1950s look about it. The engine is quite lively, but harsh and very noisy, especially at motorway speeds. The steering is heavy. The handling is erratic. The car moves about all over the road on anything but the flattest surface. So even at these prices then, these cars, the FSO and the Łada, can scarcely be recommended as value for money. This is the last of our Eastern European cars, the Yugo, from Yugoslavia of course, based on an old Fiat 127 design with a hatchback. It's a good deal smaller than the FSO and the Łada, so it's tighter in the back, and has all the inconvenience and inaccessibility of the two-door car. But it's pretty well put together. The steering is light and responsive, and the car has pretty good fuel economy at around 40 miles per gallon. However, the acceleration is poor compared with the modern Western small car. The handling is, to say the least, uncertain, particularly on bumpy roads or on greasy roads. And I would say that on anything other than rather short trips, it would be pretty wearing to drive. So there it is. The Łada and the Polski come off rather badly in this comparison, whereas the Yugo and the Skoda are rather better value for money. The major point, of course, being these cars are not simply dated in appearance. They're 10 to 20 years out of date at least in terms of technology. And you think what's happened over the past 10 years alone in, say, body protection techniques or electronics. To make the modern car so much more durable and reliable, these are bound to suffer by comparison. And you can see that in the speed at which they lose their value. In fact, depreciation is really the sting in the tail. Take the FSO 1300 as an example. At current prices, the car loses nearly 50% of its market value in the first year. and is down to 38% after only 3 years. The more modern-looking Yugo is a little better. It loses 30% in the first year and is down to 42% of its original value after only 3. Bearing that in mind, the other option, of course, is to buy a second-hand car. Now, Consumer Reports tell us that a good bet on the second-hand car market is the Vauxhall Astra, and for £3,000 you can get yourself a 3.5-year-old 1300 model. Now, already dated, of course, compared with the latest small family cars, but compared with those cars from the Eastern Bloc countries, unquestionably a modern car. Very well put together. This one's done 30,000 miles, you'd never know it. The finish is excellent, no sign of rust anywhere. The trim on the inside has really stood up to all that hard wear and tear. And when you drive it, the steering is light and positive, the handling is excellent, the acceleration is all you could ask for. You get 40 miles to the gallon, and what's more, a car that really holds its value. Going on past records, if you buy one 3 years old, you should still be able to get back about 80% of its value after a year and 49% after 3 years.